Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Empty Cloud Monastery. My name is Sāmaṇera Nipako, and today we'll be going over two short suttas, two of my favorite. You might hear me say that a lot, but these two are some of my favorites. So we'll begin by paying homage to our original teacher, Shakyamuni Buddha, the reason why we're all gathered here today, and then we'll get started. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhaṃ Dhammāṃ Saṅghāṃ Namasami. So good morning to Sood, Rebecca, Manal, Jayanta, and anyone else who might be checking in online but not saying hello or may watch this later. So the two suttas that we'll be going over today are in Anguttara Nikāya 10.79 and in Anguttara Nikāya 10.80. If you'd like to read along, you can find the links to them in the description. The translation for 10.79 is Bhante Sujato's, and the one for 10.80 is Ajahn Jeff's. So before I say anything about them, they're very short, so I'll read through them both, and then I'll go through and make some commentary based off what I think would be helpful. And if at any point you have questions, feel free to put them into the chat and I will address them at the end. So in Anguttara Nikāya 10.79, Agatavatu Sutta, grounds for resentment. Mendicants, there are 10 grounds for resentment. What 10? Thinking they did wrong to me, you harbor resentment. Thinking they are doing wrong to me, they will do wrong to me. They did wrong by someone I love. Are doing wrong by someone I love. Wrong by someone I love. They helped someone I dislike. They are helping someone I dislike. Thinking they will help someone I dislike, you harbor resentment. You get angry for no reason. These are the 10 grounds for resentment. And then the sister pairing sutta, Agahata Sutra, hatred, in Anguttara Nikāya 10.80, and this one is Ajahn Jeff's translation. There are these 10 ways of subduing hatred. Which 10? Thinking, he has done me harm, but what should I expect? One subdues hatred. Thinking, he is doing me harm, but what should I expect? One subdues hatred. Thinking, he is going to do me harm, but what should I expect? One subdues hatred. Thinking, he has done harm to people who are dear and pleasing to me, but what should I expect? One subdues hatred. Thinking, he is doing harm to people who are dear and pleasing to me, but what should I expect? One thinking, he is going to do harm to people who are dear and pleasing to me, but what should I expect? One subdues hatred. Thinking, he has aided people who are not dear or pleasing to me, but what should I expect? One subdues hatred. Thinking, he is aiding people who are not dear or pleasing to me, but what should I expect? Thinking, he is going to aid people who are not dear or pleasing to me, but what should I expect? One subdues hatred. One does not get worked up over impossibilities. These are 10 ways of subduing hatred. And for that last one, the one does not get worked up over impossibilities. The way that Bhante Sujato translate that in Sutta Central is again, and you don't get angry for no reason. So there is quite a lot in this pair of suttas. They're very short, but they're so incredibly wonderful. I used these so much in lay life. I actually had 10.80 taped to the wall above my work from home desk because it was something I would refer to quite frequently, just day to day. And I spent a lot of time on my computer, both for work and non-work related things. So if I found myself getting caught into anything related to my tendency towards aversion, I could just look up on the wall and there this was. And it was great. Sometimes people will ask if there's any practical use in remembering suttas in English rather than Pali. And this sutta, or this pair of suttas, I think is one of those cases where there is so much benefit that comes out of remembering them. This little list, he has done me harm, he is doing me harm, and so on and so forth, basically takes up every single way in which people will have resentment towards another person. It's on a personal level. They're hurting me. It's on a once removed but still personal level. They're going to harm somebody I love, or they are harming somebody I love. There is the expectation that they will hurt somebody that you love, which may or may not be justified based off of past actions they've taken. And they are currently doing that. There is a situation where there is somebody causing harm actively to yourself or somebody that you care about. And of course, there are many, many people out there who get angry for no reason or will come up with anything to be angry, justified or unjustified, in a worldly sense, of course. As I imagine many viewers may know, the only thing is anger. So, as far as the teaching of the noble ones go, there is never a justified reason for acting out of anger. There's a difference between suppression and bottling it up. So, to make that clear in the beginning, when these emotions arise, it's important to understand them, to see them, and to really know what's going on. You don't want to bottle them up and hide them, suppress them. You don't want to ignore them or pretend they're not there, like lie to yourself that you're not actually angry, or however you might particularly deal with this sort of emotion in a unproductive way. You want to understand it. So this is a misconception that I will hear come up sometimes. So just to get that out of the way in the beginning. So coming back to the sutta, or the set of suttas, the reason why I think that this is so beneficial to remember is there would be times where one of these things would happen. He has done me harm, and I would get angry about it or hold a grudge or whatever it may have been. And I used to be a professional grudge holder. Because I wanted to hold them so tightly. And I didn't have a teaching like this at that time. So once I had this teaching, I was like, wow, I need to remember this, because when somebody in the future does me harm, because somebody will, I can remember this. So when I would see that anger arise in me for whatever happened, I would be like, yes, here is a perfect training opportunity to work with my aversion. Somebody has hurt me. What should I expect? Most of my life has been filled with people doing me some sort of harm. There's a lot of really nice, wonderful people out there as well. But there's a lot of people out there who have really hurt me. And I'm sure, dear viewers, there's a lot of people out there who have really hurt you. You can also think likewise. There's a lot of people out there when I didn't have this teaching and training, and even now I still mess up sometimes, where I've caused harm unintentionally or intentionally. So if I'm doing that to people, why should I expect otherwise for other people? Now, of course, if you're the one doing the harm, this is where the teaching of the Buddha comes in, trying to reduce that as much as possible. On that note as well, something I found was especially transformative about this is I had a difficult roommate and a couple difficult coworkers when I was in college. And I tried all sorts of ways to work around this problem with my roommate, full of ignorance on my end. Like, in hindsight, I made so many mistakes. I could have handled a lot of things better. And if I had this, it would have helped a lot. It was actually around that time that I discovered this specific sutta. So I thought, okay, this anger, this resentment, it is poisoning me. This relationship is getting worse and worse. We have mutual workplaces, mutual friends. I'm not handling this well. Something's got to change. So I did two things. One is I started practicing a lot of metta and the Brahma Viharas, but especially metta toward this person, because I knew they were suffering a lot. And if they were suffering less, they would make less harmful decisions. And I knew I was suffering a lot. And if I was suffering less, I would also make less harmful decisions. The second thing I did is I started to employ this pair of suttas. So I would, instead of having them be separate, I would usually pair them together. So, for example, the first one, thinking they did me wrong, you harbor resentment. So, first, I would see myself doing that in whatever the manifestation was of any of these 10. Noticing that is the first step that I would do. I was particularly good at telling myself I wasn't angry when I was, because I was socialized that I wasn't allowed to be angry. And I decided when I was young, I didn't want to be an angry person. So I would do all sorts of mental gymnastics to tell myself, I'm not angry, blah, blah, blah. So it's important that you do actually recognize there is anger and there is resentment there. Because if you have that extra layer of delusion on top of it, it's hard to take that first step. If you don't know you're angry or you're harboring resentment or whatever the form of reversion may be, you can't take the second step, which is where I find 10.80 to be helpful. So, using that first line again, he has done me harm, but what should I expect? One subdues hatred. If you're somebody that is prone to nihilistic thinking or very negative thinking, this needs to be held delicately, because the whole what should I expect can be pessimistic. So here, I think Bhante Sujato's translation is a little bit gentler for people that could use that as a way of beating themselves up or adding another layer of aversion to whatever's going on. Bhante Sujato says, "They harmed me, but what can I possibly do?" You get rid of resentment. What I like about that translation is it emphasizes the fact you can't control the actions of others. If somebody wants to harm you, if somebody wants to harm your loved ones, if someone is harming your loved one, you can't stop them. Now, that doesn't mean you shouldn't do something. If you know that somebody is actively harming a loved one, you should try to find a way to get the loved one out of that situation. If you know somebody is going to harm your loved one, you should try to find a way to get the loved one out of that situation. And this is another way to use Bhante Sujato's as a healthy way of emphasizing this. You have control over what you can do. You have control over your skillful and unskillful actions. You have that choice. So again, you can't stop somebody from doing or trying to do those things, but you can still engage in a skillful way to try and prevent it from happening. So you also don't want to use this teaching as a deterministic way to excuse either your bad behavior or other people's bad behavior. Instead, it's a way of realizing, again, you can't control other people. So what can you do? There's not much. Outside of your control, you can be the best influence, you can be the best friend, the best parent, the best coworker. You can be incredibly patient. You can be doing everything by the book as the Buddha would approve, and someone can still cause a lot of harm. And this is because of their own conditioning. So this is a way of making that healthy balance of accepting I can do X, Y, and Z. I have control over this amount of things, but I do not have control over this. And this allows an opportunity for equanimity. That people are the heirs to their karma. For good or for ill, they will be the heirs of their karma. And if this is a teaching that you have confidence in, this is something that you can fall back on. You can also think, in the past, even if in this life I haven't caused this amount of harm, especially if it's something really egregious, there have been past lives where I was overwhelmed with aversion, overwhelmed with the delusion that I thought that acting out of this aversion would be a skillful thing to do. And in similar conditions, I chose to do the same thing. If my conditioning in this life had been a little bit different, I too could have been like this. And this can be hard sometimes. I know when I was at work, I worked with some coworkers that were this very weird blend where some of the things they would say really were horrible. And sometimes they were part of a group that I was part of, but they didn't know. And like my heart would be pounding so hard and I would want to say something, but I usually didn't. And I would think about this sutta. And I would also tie it back in with that metta. Or I would think about all the wonderful things that I know these people are also doing. For example, one of my coworkers, who was an especially mixed bag, he was a particularly often offender in saying things that weren't very kind about certain groups of people, but he took such good care of his wife. And at the time, he had a cat that was dying, and every day he would feed the cat by hand and then massage the cat so that they could urinate and defecate in the litter box. Most people would have just euthanized the cat at this point. Instead, he did everything that he could. He took time out of his day to take care of this cat till it ended its life naturally. I also found out at one point that part of why he was the way he was is because one of his kids committed suicide. That's a really tough thing for a parent to deal with. So that was another way I would work with the resentment. And likewise, this person has all this conditioning leading to them making whatever the poor decisions are. I can't change that conditioning. All I can do is do my best to try to be a good influence to help create new conditions for them in the future. But again, what can I possibly do? At the end of the day, it ends up being their decision. And this really, really helps, or it helped me tone down the aversion and hatred. So whenever you see one of these 10 popping up, you can reflect on that. If you see anger arising and you can think, beautiful, great, wonderful time to practice this sutta. I highly, highly recommend remembering these, like off the top of your head, remembering them. That way, when they pop up, it'll be like a snap in your head. Here it is. And that can pivot the situation to be able to respond more skillfully in the situation. It can also be a way to realize after you've done something that you didn't act very skillfully, you responded in anger to someone else's anger. You can be angry and still respond skillfully. Realistically, I think everybody listening to this, and including myself, is a patujana, so mistakes will be made. And we can learn from them as well. Our conditioning, just like people who are actively causing harm or who have caused harm in the past, is really strong, and it takes a lot to go against that. So we can be patient with ourselves, and we can be patient with others. And at the same time, if somebody is doing activity that is egregiously harmful, it's not the time to be a bodhisattva. Take care of yourself and the people around you, and if possible, get out of that situation. So be wise. Don't bite off more than you can chew. So I'm going to respect this sutta with 3 sadhus, and then I will check out the chat. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. All right, so hello again to Sud, Rebecca, Manal, Jayanta, Gregory, Lulu, Sean, and Diane, Usha, Bhumika, and anyone else who may be checking in online. So the first question I see is from Gregory. Getting angry for no reason. What is the Buddha referring to here? So for this particular question, getting angry for no reason, it's exactly what it says. There are a lot of people out there who will look for anything as an excuse to take out their anger or their aversion. A good example of this is you can think of people online where you say something relatively innocuous or straightforward, and they read it in such a way where they start a flame war and upset you and everybody else around them. You can also think of like family members. For me, I come from a family that is Irish Italian, and anger is the name of the game. And they get so angry so quickly. You could be having a discussion about something and you just disagree with them a little bit, and fire and brimstone. It goes 0 to 100 real quick, and it can be over something super minor. So it's situations like that where any reasonable person or anybody else around them would know, okay, this level of anger or anger at all as a response to this is really unjustified. So that would be what the Buddha is speaking about there. Um, so hopefully that means you have many people in your life that don't get angry for no reason, or that you likewise don't get angry for no reason. So Sood asks, sometimes, no matter how much you try, you have extreme amount of anger, and all the negative things about someone when interacting with them flood the mind, and sometimes metta doesn't work. What does the Buddha recommend in that instance? So you're absolutely right. Sometimes metta in the moment doesn't work. So what I would do in situations like that, as this is something that would frequently happen to me, is I would try to take a step back. First, I would have to acknowledge I was angry. And sometimes that first step was a big enough barrier of itself. I would have a very hard time admitting that I was angry because I didn't like to be angry, because I didn't want to be like some of my family members. So step one, realize that that's going on. Sometimes it can be happening right in front of our nose, and we can't acknowledge it to the point that we can do anything about it. So once you've gone past that point, okay, I'm in a negative thought pattern about this person. I know I can't practice metta. So when that would happen, I would fall back on this sutta. Or if I couldn't practice metta, I would think of good things that they've done. I would think, okay, right now, this person is doing or has done X, Y, and Z. They hurt me in this way, and all the cycles in which I can think about how they hurt me. What is something good that I know they've done? This is a tactic you see in another sutta very similar to these two in the Book of Fives from Sariputta, but I don't remember the number off the top of my head. So sometime later today, after this video is done, I'll put it in the description. But Sariputta goes through 5 ways of working through resentment. And one of them that I particularly like, which is the 4th one, is imagine that you are going through the desert and you are parched. You really need water, and you will take anything that you find. You come across this cow's hoof print that has a little bit of water in it. And because there's water in it, you can see mud on the bottom. You know, if you stir that water at all, it will also stir the mud and make it not drinkable. So you get down on your hands and knees and you gently slurp the water out of that cow's hoof print so as to not disturb the mud. You've probably heard me say this example before because, like I said, I love it. So if you find somebody where you have just a huge list of everything they've ever done wrong and could do wrong, are doing wrong now, and you can't stop it, pause. Is there anything good this person has ever done? And if you think you will have a hard time thinking of anything good they have done while this is actively happening, when it isn't happening, write them down. That way you can come to it either in the moment or sometime later to start to Pour those things into your mind. Like that small amount of water in the desert, in order to at least keep your head above the water, keep your wholesome qualities above the water, even if the rest of you is completely committed to this resentment, something to change the narrative. Maybe you've seen that person hold a door open for people. Maybe you've seen them pay for somebody else's lunch. Maybe you saw them stop at a crosswalk to let people pass. Even though it is the state law in many states, a lot of people don't do that. So even little things like that, don't brush them under the rug. Perhaps they're like my coworker, where you could write a book of all the terrible things they've said about certain groups, and yet they're doing this wonderful stuff for their wife and their cat. Maybe you can't think of something specific that they've done that's wholesome, but maybe you can reflect on conditioning that makes you understand why they are the way they are. And not in a fairy tale kind of way, but in an objective way. For example, there's one family member of mine who, as they've got older, has got a lot better. But I found out a couple years ago that when this family member was a little kid, they were really brutally bullied by a lot of the other people in school, like getting strangled by the bullies in school level of harassment towards this family member of mine. And I would learn other things about that as well. And when I learned that, I thought, wow, I really wish I had known this when I was younger. It would have allowed me to at least take a step back and understand why this person reacts this way when there's even a little hint of aggression or disagreement being shown to them. They were conditioned by the people around them that the only way they could stay safe was by being angry and by being aggressive. Otherwise, their life was literally being threatened. So be creative in this sort of stuff. If you genuinely, truly do not want to let anger and resentment take you over, think of yourself like in the desert and with these examples that I've given. Anything, even a little bit, to turn that narrative. And this can be hard. The first couple of times that I employed this, it helped a little bit, but of course, my momentum was like a train going downhill without functioning. I don't know if trains have brakes, but like then think of like an 18-wheeler going down a steep hill and the brake lines have been cut. It's just going, and whenever it hits something, there's going to be a big, ugly mess. So at first, that's what it was like. So be patient with yourself as well. This isn't just going to immediately change. You have to strengthen this muscle. And Mara is going to be very convincing that no, continue to have that extreme amount of anger. Despite that, do it anyway. Be patient with yourself. This could take weeks, months, or years. It took me years, and it's something that I still work on. But it's something that, because I spent so much time dedicatedly working on this, it allows me to go from actually, I'm very rarely angry these days. And if I am, it's a surprise. And instead of lasting days or weeks or even months, it'll last a couple hours at most, and it's maybe a couple times a year. It's so infrequent that I can list every single instance when I was anything more than just a little bit annoyed in any given year. In the past, I was angry so often, I wouldn't have been able to tell you how many times in a week I was angry. So the important thing is that you keep at it. Don't get discouraged. Every time you find yourself getting angry, remember that simile. And if you really, truly cannot find a single good thing about this person. You can think of the fifth one from the book, the sutta in the Book of the Fives that I mentioned, where you have compassion for that person. If someone is really, truly that awful and terrible, where there are genuinely no good things about them, even anything tiny, you can reflect on the fact that they will be the heirs of their karma. And if you think they're insufferable, they have to live with themselves every single day. So imagine how that is. In order to be like that, there's got to be a lot of suffering and a lot of delusion. And they may not think that they're suffering, but that sort of behavior does not come from someone that is happy and well adjusted. And then later, however long it takes, once you feel a little more diffused, then you can try practicing metta. And it doesn't even necessarily have to be how people usually think of metta, like may they be well, may they be happy, may they be peaceful. Instead, it could be something like, may they have the wisdom to make better choices. May they have the wisdom to cause less harm. Whatever conditions have arose for them to be this way, may better conditions arise so they no longer hurt themselves and others. Be creative. Don't sell yourself short. The anger is difficult. It's that poisoned root with a tiny honey tip. It's something that is really good at grabbing our attention. It's a lot of momentum very quickly, but don't give up. Keep at it. And like I said before as well, don't give up on yourself. If you do this consistently, if you really, truly, honestly, and got to be honest with yourself about this, want to get rid of your resentment, you have no choice but to work on this diligently. And you can. Every time anger arises, you have an opportunity to work with this. And at the end of it, you can also practice metta for yourself, especially if you didn't respond to somebody skillfully. You're unenlightened, you're working on it, and a lot of people aren't. So give yourself some credit. So Rebecca says, doesn't it take a certain amount of patience to stay with the painful feelings of aversion and anger? How to develop kanti in the moment with yourself and others? So this is another really good question. So the first way to develop patience is to be forgiving and patient with yourself when you realized you were not patient. There will be many opportunities in the start of this where you're not patient. Like a match, you just act on your conditioning. So when you recognize that happened, that's good. That means your wisdom faculty is operating. I didn't act skillfully. Then you'll mess up again, and you'll mess up again, and you'll mess up again and again and again and again. And at some point, you will see the physical and or mental patterns that led to you messing up all those other times. And you will choose not to. So, by paying attention to the conditions that led to you acting out unskillfully, and also paying attention to what's going on physically and mentally, and vowing to do better in the future, that is how you start the patience. Little teeny tiny baby steps, and it might not even be steps. It might be more like shuffling your feet a couple inches here and there. As you get more comfortable doing that, then you'll be able to take bigger steps and strides. So once you have that out of the way, so you're able to recognize when you're starting to get angry before you act out on it, then that adds a little bit of space. You could think of it like you're typing a comment on YouTube where you're angry at this monk for talking about all this sort of stuff that's difficult to do, and you take a moment to pause and you reread the comment before you press enter. And then you decide, you know what, I'm not going to send this, and you delete it. Once you get to this stage, for me at least, it was like a breath of fresh air. It allowed me a lot more opportunity, a lot more ability to actually practice that patience because I would see it. And because I was doing all these other practices as well, it allowed me to then react more skillfully. And I would think about the ways in which I didn't act skillfully. And sometimes when a conversation was active, I would say something, I would start to say something that was unskillful, and I would pivot it. Either I would stop the sentence, I would, if I'd already finished it, I would try to come at it from another angle, or if I said something that was really not okay, I would just apologize, which was another thing that was difficult for me to do. So as I saw my practice improving, as I saw my behavior improving, as I saw people around me behaving better because of the way I behaved to them, that allowed me to have more patience because I saw the positive results it had on my life and the people around me. So, kind of like what I was saying to Sood, it's not something that's going to happen overnight. This can take you weeks, months, years. And quite a bit of what I said to Sood as well also applies to this. You're not going to want to, and you're not going to be able to actively develop that patience if you don't understand what's going on or if you don't see what's going on. And if you're not patient with yourself, how can you expect to be patient with others if you can't even learn to be patient with yourself with these sort of things? If you understand what's going on in you, you can very often understand what's going on with other people as well. And because you understand that they're suffering, they're acting out of their own delusion and ignorance, just like you have many times, that makes it less personal, and you're able to respond in a way that's more skillful because you see what's going on. Of course, people are acting in this way. Greed, hatred, and delusion. What should I expect? And another thing I say often is be creative. See how you're not patient. The way in which we're not patient, there's a lot of overlap, but your specific situations, if you see that there's patterns, think about how you can pivot it. Think about the way in which things didn't go well and the way things have gone well before, and work with that. Which isn't very specific, but every situation is different. The number one thing that helped me with this was this skeleton, this outline that I gave during the talk, and being creative, being willing to make mistakes and see what worked well and what didn't, and then from there continue to grow. And I feel like it's worked pretty well. People are often surprised when I mention that I am an aversion type. If people had met me a decade ago or when I was a kid, there would have been no doubt whatsoever that I'm an aversion type. So it really does work. You just got to keep at it. That's the important thing. And then Rebecca follows up. I can't go to metta or compassion until much later, usually. Like I said with Sood, this is pretty normal in the moment. So if you can do it at all in the future, that's still better than not at all. That helps build that foundation to be able to come to it sooner in the future. So that seems to be the last question I see online. Thank you, everybody, for checking in. This is, like I said, some of my two favorite suttas. I really truly do highly recommend that you remember them off the top of your head. That if you are someone who is prone to aversion like myself, that perhaps you post them somewhere it's visual. So above your computer, at your desk at work, maybe above your bed or something similar, somewhere where you will have a constant reminder of this. That way, even if you don't remember it word for word at the top of your head, when these situations arise, the overall skeleton of the suttas will come to mind. What should I expect? That's how you get rid of resentment. And with the getting angry for no reason, being aware of that as well. So with that, I'm going to conclude the talk today. Some small announcements is we are still on winter retreat here, but we will be done on February 28th. Starting the first weekend of March, we will be open for residencies again. So please feel free to apply for a residency in March or beyond if you are interested. Our monk chats, I think most of you know this by now, but are at 8:00 a.m. on Fridays now. And Bhante Sudaso and or Ayasoma are often checking in for those. And if there is ever a sutta that you would like to be streamed, given a talk about, we do take sutta suggestions. So you can send us an email and we can add it to our list of future suttas that we can do here on YouTube. So may you all be happy, well, and peaceful. May you always have access to the Dhamma, affinity to practice the Dhamma, good conditions to practice the Dhamma, always be reborn where the Dhamma is available, and may you soon realize the threefold bliss. May you share the merit of this practice today with all of your loved ones, past, present, and future, and with yourself. And may you be patient with yourself and others while you work through your own greed, aversion, and delusion. We're all doing our best that we can in the midst of delusion. So have a wonderful rest of your day, everyone, and until next time.